Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this very important and special occasion. First, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Commissioners Kopp, McDowell, and Clyburn from the Federal Communications Commission for coming to Gallaudet today to host a field hearing. It's a very important FCC activity. This will be one of several field hearings in several places. And this is a way that FCC gathers important testimony and hears concerns and issues and gathers information from the public, as well as from consumers of federal communication services. So that's very important for Gallaudet. And we're very proud and honored to have them host this hearing here. We have a very fine and distinguished list of witnesses who will later be providing testimony and views on the needs of people who are deaf and hard of hearing. This is also an opportunity for all of us to learn about the important work that has been done at the government level to look after our needs and to safeguard our rights and progress and improvement. Innovative internet-based technology has had a fantastic impact on our lives, on the lives of people, and not only in the way that people with disabilities get information, but in the way that we work. It allows us to become more involved in our civic affairs and to be really active participants and members of the community. We've come a long way from the days when we had little. Now we have much, but there's still a need for much more in the future. I speak personally when I say that. I come from a generation of deaf people who depended on their hearing children to communicate with the hearing world. There was something magic about the firstborn hearing child of deaf parents when they became 3 years of age. On that day, my wife and I went and ordered a telephone and installed it in our home and taught our boy, our first son, how to hear on the telephone and then explain to us what he was hearing. That today might be labeled child abuse, but it was the only way that deaf people could communicate with the hearing world 40 and 50 years ago. And that's a memory I have of the struggles that deaf people experienced. And now there have been changes and improvements in many things. I had the pleasure of walking through the exhibits with Commissioner Kopp and McDowell a while ago, and I was so impressed with the technology that is available. There is a lot under development, and better things are coming. The Commission has been asked to submit to the Congress a broadband plan for the future that will identify how people with disabilities are able to access telecommunications technology and video technology. These are important areas of concern and need in the deaf community. And I think, again, this is a wonderful place for this meeting because we have almost 2,000 deaf people of all different ages on this campus. And we have a tremendous interest in what the FCC is planning to do. We have the fortune to have wonderful commissioners, dedicated professionals and individuals who are very active and working toward the goals of access for communication for deaf and hard of hearing people. And we're proud to have them as part of the community. Then we thank them for being here on behalf of our university community. And we look forward to this hearing. And we look forward to the report that you will send to Congress. And to Congress acting on our behalf to increase our opportunities so that we can benefit from the many things that are undergoing development now that will have an even greater impact on how we work and live and communicate and learn in the future. So thank you for coming today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Copps. I'm a commissioner at the FCC, and I am delighted to welcome everybody to this official FCC field hearing on broadband access for people with disabilities. Thank you again, President Davila, for your gracious opening remarks and the warm hospitality of this university. It's always a tremendous pleasure for me to come to this wonderful campus. I've been here several times before, and what a great place it is, and what an appropriate place that this is to hold this field hearing on how we can really turn the corner on access for people with disabilities. In this truly state-of-the-art auditorium, I think we have what we need to conduct a really good hearing today. I am impressed with the space. I'm impressed with the number of people that have turned out so early this morning, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all of our very distinguished panelists. But despite all of the positive attributes of today's hearing, let's take a step back and realize that we operate under some limitations too. We can't have everybody here that we would like to have here this morning. There's lots of other people that we could be hearing from and are trying to hear from in other venues. Not everyone can be connected even to our webcast this morning. I can't help but imagine the potential if everyone interested and everyone affected had access to high-speed broadband. I've been talking about this issue for a long, long time. Some of you in the audience will remember perhaps that the first speech I gave as an FCC commissioner back in 2001 was to the international conference held at the Telecommunications for the Deaf at Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And as a newly minted FCC commissioner at that time, I was learning about what access to advanced communications and information services could mean for the people I met out there. I was so struck by the ability of everybody I met and the commitment I met, and I never forget going to dinner with Claude Stout and a number of other people the night before I gave my speech, and I just happened to ask, what's the reality of unemployment in the deaf and hard of hearing community? And they said it was like 75%, and it just kind of hit me like a hammer to see all of the people there with the capacity to contribute to our culture, with the commitment and the willingness to really participate, and then to think what these new technologies could do to enhance their ability to create opportunities for themselves, opportunities for their families, and really opportunities for our entire country. So here we are 8 years later. We've had some positive changes, I think, when it comes to telecommunications for people with disabilities, including expanded access to telecommunications relay services and video relay services and improved closed captioning. Now is the time for real high-speed broadband. And for the past 8 years, I've been saying that broadband really can be the great enabler that restores our country's well-being and opens the doors of opportunity for all Americans to pass through, no matter who they are, no matter where they live, no matter what the particular circumstances of their individual lives. Every American has to have access to this technology and all the many services it spins off. Because this is technology that intersects, when you stop to think about it, with just about every great challenge that confronts our nation. Whether it's creating jobs or improving our education or solving our energy dependence problems or tackling global climate change, health insurance, you name it, the list goes on, equal opportunity. and certainly overcoming disabilities. There's no solution for any of these challenges, not one of the challenges that I just mentioned, that does not have a broadband component to it. And that is our challenge now, to make that technology work to meet the needs of the station. We're not talking of the nation. We're not talking about broadband for the sake of broadband. We're talking about broadband for what it can do for every American. So today's hearing is about creating opportunities for our brothers and sisters living with disabilities. And it's even more timely now because of the terrible and disproportionate toll the current economic downturn has taken on the disabilities community. As a group, Americans with disabilities are experiencing in many areas worse impacts really than other folks. And I am told that during this downturn, 17% of Americans with disabilities have lost their jobs. And again, people with so much talent, so many skills, so much dedication, wanting nothing more than a chance to be productive. So it is all of our responsibilities to provide the tools to fix these problems. And it's not just something that's nice for us to do, it's their right. And I think it's pretty much a civil right to have this kind of access, because access denied is opportunity denied. 8 years ago, I told many of the folks gathered here this morning that I was an optimist, and I still am, and maybe now we are coming within reach, because at long last, your government and mine is making a real, honest-to-goodness commitment to broadband, a deep and abiding commitment to get this transformative technology out to all of our people. The administration and the Congress, as Dr. DeVilla said, have made it plain that they want broadband brought to the four corners of this country. Again, that means everyone. I just don't believe that in this 21st century, and we've only begun to see the communications wonders that this century will produce, anybody can be a fully productive citizen, able to open those doors of opportunity without having access to these technologies and services. Apart from that commitment that was made by Congress and President, it was really great news to me and my colleagues from the FCC when Congress and the President designated our agency, the Federal Communications Commission, to develop this National Broadband Plan. Congress actually wants this plan by February 17th of 2010. That's a little more than 3 months from today, and it is a truly monumental challenge. But that's exactly why we are here today, because we need your help. Our chairman, Julius Janikowski's mission has been to get this job done in the most open and transparent and outreaching way possible. This is the most open and outreaching proceeding I have ever experienced at the FCC, and I think perhaps in the history of it. And I'm happy to see my friend Blair Levin here, who is coordinating a stellar professional team at the FCC to undertake this massive undertaking, to do the outreach, to corral the expertise, conducting 2 and 3 workshops a week at the FCC. And we've already had 2 very, very helpful workshops in conjunction with our friends and colleagues from the disabilities communities, and there'll probably be some more leading up, and we led up to this hearing today. So it's an important priority for our commission, and I am so glad that Blair and his team are focusing so laser-like on what this technology can do and how we can make it do it for the disabilities communities. We have great panels assembled here today, a great audience, part of it assembled here at Gallaudet and part of it out there on the web. Your participation in this process is encouraged. Your participation in the FCC developing this plan is, as they say, merely essential. It is really essential that we have your input. There's that old saying, you probably heard it before, decisions without you can be decisions against you. I think the representatives and the advocates that represent your community are aware of that, and that's why they work so hard. And I want to just take a second to express my appreciation for the advocacy work that has been done by so many people in this room on just to keep these issues alive at the FCC, to keep these issues alive in the halls of Congress, and to keep these issues before the media and before the American people. It is a tremendous public service, and I think the country is better for it. In addition to our discussion in this room, I want to encourage all of you to visit later on after the hearing ends, the technology demonstrations taking place in the lobby. Again, Dr. DeVilla mentioned that we went through there and saw some of these kind of mind-boggling technologies that are becoming available already, and I think we're just beginning to see the dawn of what's going to become available over the next 15 or 20 years. So I thank AOL and AT&T and the DC Public Library and Microsoft and RIM BlackBerry and REIC on Telecom Access for being here. Take a few moments to see some of these opportunity-creating new tools. A couple of logistical matters before I move on. We're going to have 2 sessions of discussions with our illustrious panelists this morning. There are certainly, as I said, many more people who could have made excellent additions to today's panel and perhaps provided us with some additional perspectives, but we just couldn't include everybody, although we've heard from many of these others in our workshops and will continue to solicit their input. For them, I want to encourage ongoing engagement in the Commission's open and inclusive broadband examination, whether it's online or through our broadband.gov website, in written comments to the Commission, or, as I said, in perhaps other venues that will be created. I'm a big believer in open discussion, and I want to be able to address as many questions as we can from the public today. So after each panelist, all the panelists on each panel conclude their presentations, we will open this to questions from the audience to the panelists. And to facilitate that process and to get as many questions as possible and to avoid duplication, it's been recommended that we take the questions in written form. So we have cards available for you to write down your questions and concerns, and FCC staff, you can see some of them around here right now, is available throughout the room to assist you. I want to extend a special welcome to those who are participating in this via the internet. The FCC makes a practice of live streaming with captioning for all of our broadband proceedings. And in addition to taking questions from the audience here, we will also entertain questions from online viewers via Twitter and our live video stream on broadband.gov/live. You know, next year marks the 20th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We still have a lot of work to do to make its aspirations a reality. But the hard work and spirit that gave us this act can make a difference once again if we do our work right in the weeks and months just ahead. And it's in that spirit we come together today. Together we draw inspiration from what has been accomplished and energize ourselves for what remains to be done. I am so pleased that 2 of my colleagues have joined me here this morning at the Commission. I thank them for coming down. They have been very active participants in all of our broadband proceedings, but I know that each of them has a special dedication to this particular hearing and to the challenges that are going to be discussed at this hearing today. So before we go further, I want to ask each of them if they would care, and I hope they do, make a comment. First is my friend and colleague, Rob McDowell. And Rob, if you'd like to have a microphone, it is yours.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having us, and thank you to President Davila and all the wonderful folks here at Gallaudet for hosting us on your beautiful campus. And it's a terrific day. One of the many things that's great about being an FCC commissioner is you get to meet so many wonderful people from all over. But I can't think of the last time I was on the same dais with a beautiful and talented Academy Award winner. So I want to thank Ms. Matlin for all that she has done and everything you do going forward. And many, many thanks to Commissioner Copps for hosting this important field hearing and kicking it off. His leadership on disabilities issues is truly impressive, and I have appreciated working with him and my colleagues on these important issues over the years. As the Commission works on a National Broadband Plan, it is very appropriate and critical that it include all interested parties in the process. The Commission has had a long-standing commitment to ensuring communication systems serve disabled Americans. The information and opinions we receive today and beyond will help drive our efforts to keep disabled Americans connected to society. A core function of government is to help those who cannot help themselves when all else fails, and that is our focus today. In this spirit, as a little bit of background and history of the FCC recently, during my tenure on the Commission, I've wholeheartedly supported efforts to improve the availability and choices of communication services for people with disabilities. With the Telecommunications Relay Services, or TRS, for example, the Commission has helped ensure that persons with hearing and speech disabilities obtain functionally equivalent communication services. In addition, because Voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP, services are rapidly becoming a substitute for traditional telephone service in the marketplace, it was imperative that the Commission extend the accessibility obligations mandated under the statute to those services as well. I was therefore proud to support a Commission action in 2007, which extended to providers of interconnected VoIP services and manufacturers of specialized interconnected VoIP equipment the accessibility obligations contained in those statutes. Additionally, I felt it was essential to support the Commission's decision last year to ensure the successful transition of Internet-based TRS to 10-digit numbering. That action makes it possible for Internet-based TRS users to be able to make and receive calls in the same manner used by voice telephone consumers using a standard 10-digit telephone number. This was a major step towards ensuring that those with hearing and speech disabilities are afforded functionally equivalent telephone services. This order will become effective next week. Also earlier this year, I thought it imperative that the Commission stop dithering and proceed ahead quickly with two important notices of proposed rulemaking, each of which have the real potential to significantly improve the quality of life for those Americans living with chronic conditions. And many thanks again to Mike Copps for all that he did on these matters. As a result, first, the Commission is analyzing the Alfred Mann Foundation's request to use spectrum for implanting small radio devices into patients with paralysis and other neuromuscular ailments. These devices will help restore mobility for stroke victims, people paralyzed by car accidents and combat wounds, as well as those who suffer from other ailments. We are also examining a similarly interesting proposal submitted by GE Medical Systems, which seeks to use spectrum to develop advanced body sensing technologies that will allow continuous patient monitoring, whether the patient is located within or outside of a hospital setting. I hope you will join me in thanking the AMF and GE Medical for their groundbreaking work in this area. I'm grateful to be a small part of the effort, which to me is all the more gratifying given my belief that our work in these proceedings represents government duty at its best. I am committed to doing my part to ensure that we complete these two proceedings in an expeditious manner. On another matter, in February of 2008, I was proud to have worked with my fellow commissioners and the Hearing Aid Compatibility Joint Consensus Working Group to update the Commission's rules governing hearing aid compatible mobile handsets. I commend the working group, comprised of organizations representing the interests of consumers with hearing loss, wireless carriers, and handset manufacturers, for its hard work on that issue. In adopting their joint consensus plan, the Commission not only advanced the goals established by Congress in the Hearing Aid Compatibility Act, we also recognized the working group's expertise. In the traditional media arena, the Commission has worked to ensure that video programming complies with the closed captioning mandates established by Congress, not only for English language programming, but for Spanish language programming as well. Late last year, the Commission voted to streamline the complaint process concerning closed captioning. While implementing those changes is still a work in progress, our staff is laboring to make the best possible use of online technology to help people file complaints quickly and easily. More recently, the Commission has established a working group to address technical problems that have been triggered by closed captioning in the digital television environment. We expect to receive recommendations on steps to resolve those problems within a few months. In the meantime, the Commission continues to enforce our rule that video programming distributors, be they broadcasters, cable, satellite TV, or telephone company video providers, make any emergency information they transmit accessible to those with hearing or vision disabilities. This is only a partial list of initiatives the Commission has undertaken in the past 3 years to help people with disabilities. The next mountain for us to climb is to submit to Congress a National Broadband Plan by February 17th. Among the many issues Congress has asked us to address is how America's broadband ecosystem can be improved to help people with disabilities. I cannot think of a more noble endeavor for us to pursue. Today's hearing will add the depth and texture needed for us to fully understand the challenges and, more importantly, the opportunities that lie before us. The Commission does this in the best possible way, by piercing beyond mere words on a page and examining these issues from the perspectives of real human beings. Today, we do not try to explore how best to help the disabled. Rather, we endeavor to empower people with disabilities. I thank the panelists for agreeing to participate in this field hearing today, and I thank all of you for your commitment to these very, very important issues.
Thank you, Rob, for that very informative and eloquent statement, and thank you for all the hard and visionary work you do on these issues. Now it's my pleasure to introduce one of the newest members of the Federal Communications Commission, Honorable Mignon Clyburn. She is new to the Commission, but she is not new to any of the telecommunications issues under our oversight, having worked on many of them as the head of the South Carolina Public Service Commission with its writ over telecommunications, energy, and other projects too. I had the pleasure recently of traveling with her around South Carolina and just to see how she really relates to and gets all of these issues and understands the dimensions they have on the human beings you were mentioning in your talk was inspirational to me, so I think she's going to make just a marvelous contribution, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mignon Clyburn to you now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm from the South, so when I say good morning, I want a response. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you and Dr. Davila and Gallaudet University for hosting us. I can think of no more appropriate forum for this important hearing on broadband access for people with disabilities than this extraordinary institution that we are so fortunate to have right here in Washington, D.C. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Commissioner Copps, for that fine introduction and for his leadership on this issue. I'd like to thank his staff and the staff at the FCC for working hard to bring us here this morning. I am so very pleased to be here with you. As a matter of fact, I woke up 5 o'clock this morning in order to be here with you. So if I look a little tired, it's because I left South Carolina this morning because I could not miss being here with you. So I'm looking forward for as long as I can to stay with you and hear from these distinguished panelists. But I have to say, as a point of personal privilege, I am so thrilled to be next to Ms. Madeline. I have grown up with her because she looks way better than I do. So to say that I grew up seeing her on television would be a disservice to her. But at every step of her career, I could almost name her kids. Because when I saw her on screen, Not only did her outer beauty show, but her commitment showed. When she got married, I screamed as if I were at the wedding. When she had her first child, I was rejoicing because she showed through her example that persons with challenges can do anything. You're an example to communities with challenges. You're an example to communities like mine with challenges. So I thank you for being such an example, because your influence, your reach, your commitment, your ability to speak out and reach help us all. So thank you very much. When I came to the commission a few months ago, I decided that before meeting with any industry players, that I would meet with representatives of public interest, consumer, and civil rights organizations. My office hosted several roundtables, and to one of them we invited representatives of several disability rights advocacy organizations. I am pleased to see a number of those people that I met in September here in the audience. Those roundtables were valuable to me in many ways, but more than anything else, I was struck by some advice that I received from one of the disabilities rights advocates. This wise woman, who I think is in the audience, said to me that it was crucial for the commission to consider the needs of the disabled during its decision-making process, rather than falling into an unfortunate default position of addressing these issues after the fact. Why? Because if we are forced to retrofit the needs of the disabled, and I quote what she said, as an afterthought, then we are bound to make flawed determinations. Now, we all know this is the best and most wise approach. We make better policy decisions when we consult all parties affected during the decision-making process, no matter who they are and no matter what the subject matter may be. But I think we've learned our lesson at the FCC on this score in the disability arena more than any other arena, and today's hearing is an affirmation of that fact. We want your input on the front end as we develop the National Broadband Plan for this country. By consulting with you today and by continuing to listen to you in the coming months, we will develop a better, more inclusive plan. We don't want to have anything to do with this thing called retrofitting. We don't want that to happen. And when it comes to people with disabilities, we want to get it right the first time. And with your help, we will. So I want to thank you again for being here today. And please accept my apologies if I have to leave early. I've got another engagement in South Carolina. Though sometimes it's good to go home, but 2 times in one day is a bit tough. But I hope my friend Karen and the other distinguished panelists will forgive me for that. But please know that I will review what I missed in today's discussion in full and with great interest. This is an exciting and important time for us all, and I appreciate you for taking the time to help the Federal Communications Commission shape a national broadband plan that truly serves the interests of all Americans. Again, I say good morning.
Well, I thank both of my eloquent colleagues for their statements and thank them for being here this morning. Let's move on now and turn to our panels. The first one is going to focus on experiences and opportunities and barriers, discussing the good and the bad of broadband accessibility today. And the second will offer solutions and recommendations on how we can improve broadband access for people with disabilities going forward as part of the National Broadband Plan. Each panelist will be given 5 minutes for his or her presentations, and I ask everybody to be mindful of our time constraints. And after the panelists have made their presentations, we'll have some time for discussion and questions directed to them, and there will be a short 10-minute break between the panels so we can just set up here. Our first panelist certainly needs no introduction. and actually she already got a brilliant introduction from Mignon here. Marlee Matlin has received worldwide acclaim ever since her film debut in Children of a Lesser God, for which she received the Academy Award for Best Actress, the youngest recipient of that award ever in history, and one of only 4 actresses, I believe, to receive this high honor for her first film. And in addition to the Oscars, she received the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress in a Drama. In 1994, Ms. Matlin was appointed by President Bill Clinton to the Corporation for National Service, served as chairperson for National Volunteer Work Week, and was honored in a Rose Garden ceremony at the White House. She currently serves as a national celebrity spokesman for the American Red Cross. And as many of you know, she was instrumental in getting legislation passed in Congress in support of closed captioning. And she's here this week not only to attend this hearing, but also to continue her work on Capitol Hill, which she did yesterday. And she is always extremely welcome and extremely successful when she goes to Capitol Hill. She serves on the boards of a number of charitable organizations, including the Children Affected by AIDS Foundation and Easter Seals. She has received numerous awards, not just for her acting ability, but for her charitable work. She has authored 3 novels for children. We're truly honored to have her with us today for the expertise that she brings to this and for her ability to really help us let the rest of the country know about these challenges, because I think when people really understand, then people will react, and the moment to make that happen is right now. So without further ado, Ms. Matlin.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I chose to sit here for my remarks so that everyone could see me. So is that all right with everyone? Well, no. Well, you know who I am, so you don't need my name here. And I don't need this, certainly. Well, good morning, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Marlee Matlin. Let me first say that I am honored to have had the opportunity to appear before you today. Thank you to Gallaudet University for your wonderful hospitality. And thank you to the National Association of the Deaf and Purple Communications for making my trip here today possible. Most importantly, thank you to all of you, students, faculty, community members who came to show your support. Though many of you may know me by the many acting roles that I have played, from Children of a Lesser God to the various TV appearances on shows like Desperate Housewives, Law & Order SVU, The West Wing, and most recently as the crazy lady who asked America to read my hips on ABC's Dancing with the Stars. I am also a consumer and a member of a very vibrant and rich cultural community. I am deaf and one of 36 million Americans who is deaf or hard of hearing. When I was 7 years old, my mother took me to the International Center of Deafness and the Arts in suburban Chicago to help unlock my inner actress. Despite being deaf at 18 months old, my parents were determined to treat me as any child should be treated, with love and respect. And despite what doctors had predicted for me, in my parents' mind, nothing would ever be denied me. So, when it became evident that their little girl wanted to be an actress, I was born a ham, by the way, they took me to the center where I found my true love. That was acting. And on the day of my first visit, I discovered they were putting together a production of The Wizard of Oz. And no sooner had I walked in than I insisted that there was only one role for me. I'm Dorothy, I declared. That's how much confidence and freedom my parents encouraged in me. And needless to say, I got the role. By the time that I was 13, I had been acting in plays, in sign, and in song throughout the Midwest. And one day at the center, I was told that the most famous person in America, not President Carter, by the way, but the actor Henry Winkler, known throughout the world as the Fonz on Happy Days, was paying a visit. With that Matlin determination and independence in me, I went right up to him and I said, "Hi, I'm Marlee. I want to be an actor just like you in Hollywood. And with equal determination, cultivated by Henry's own experience with barriers, growing up with dyslexia, Henry looked me straight in the eye and said in his coolest, most Fonzie-like voice, "Marley, sweetheart, you can be whatever you want to be if you just follow your heart, and your dreams will come true." And 8 years later, I was standing on a stage in Hollywood accepting an Academy Award for Best Actress for my very first film. But the moment that should have been victorious was actually bittersweet. Because the morning after I'd won the Oscar, a very famous film critic proclaimed that my victory the night before was the result of a pity vote. And as he went on to say, because I was a deaf person in a deaf role, that let doubts to whether I was really acting. In other words, I didn't deserve the Oscar. Never in my life did I feel so limited, so handicapped. Fortunately, it was Henry Winkler who helped me get back on the right path, encouraging me with the same words he told me when I was 13. Nothing or no one should ever stand in the way of my dreams. But this time, he said, I had an Academy Award in my hand to prove it. 2 years later, with that determination to stand equally with my peers in the entertainment field in my heart, I lobbied and succeeded in getting the film, which inspired me to become an actress, The Wizard of Oz, closed captioned for the first time. And the following year, in 1990, I took it one step further, and I worked with Gallaudet's own National Center for Law and the Deaf to come to Capitol Hill and to lobby on behalf of legislation that required all television with screens 13 inches or larger to be equipped with closed captioning technology. Like the critics who doubted my ability as an actor who was deaf, placing me on a level below my hearing peers, it was the TV manufacturers and programmers who resisted in providing access, equal access for millions of Americans who were deaf or hard of hearing. But with hard work and determination, we were successful in getting the decoder bill passed. 6 years later, legislation was passed to require that broadcast television be fully closed captioned. For 36 million Americans who for so long were left out of the mainstream when it came to broadcast TV, we were finally able to get the words that hearing people all take for granted for our world. Just last month, The Wizard of Oz celebrated a magnificent milestone, its 70th anniversary. And now, for the first time in broadcast history, the film was being streamed live by Netflix to every single American who had access to a computer for free. I was eager to share the film with my children, particularly my 5-year-old daughter, in whose eyes I saw the same wonderment and excitement as I had when I was 7, watching the story of the young girl from Kansas who had dreams that took her over the rainbow. But when I opened up my laptop and I hit the play button, I was horrified to find that the film that I had successfully lobbied to get closed captioned 20 years ago was being shown without captions. I was told the technology was coming and that I had to be patient and wait. Well, as you've heard from my brief history, I don't take things lying down, and I did some investigation. First, I made noise on Twitter to the nearly 28,000 followers that I had, and then I made sure that my friends, like Ashton Kutcher, who has over 3 million followers on Twitter, did as well. And eventually I found out there actually was no problem in the technology. In fact, the technology exists to stream with closed captions. What it came down to was the issue, the same issue I encountered 20 years ago. A lack of understanding, a lack of will, and a lack of desire by broadcasters, content providers, and equipment manufacturers to provide full access in not passing through closed captions for programming already captioned. Today, if I open any computer and go to websites like abc.com, Hulu, iTunes, or any that broadcasts content that has already been broadcast with closed captions, I and millions of Americans like me would find that the captions are not there. I couldn't even watch myself on Dancing with the Stars rebroadcast on abc.com. Can you imagine that? The same would be true for shows that won Emmy Awards like 30 Rock or even Mad Men. Even more distressing is information related to emergency and live events shown on TV with captions are streamed on the internet without captions. Nowhere was this more glaring than during the unveiling ceremony of the Helen Keller statue in the Capitol Rotunda, which was streamed live on CNN for that event, and there was not one closed caption to be found. The fact that it was an event to honor Helen Keller made it all the more painful for me. Here was a woman who fought for equality and access nearly 100 years ago, and whom I looked up to as a role model, and yet I was unable to share in the celebration of her life. It was simply unacceptable. So, what can we do together to change this? Just as I did 20 years ago, yesterday I lobbied on Capitol Hill along with the people from the National Association of the Deaf and Purple Communications, representing the Coalition of Organizations for Accessible Technology, for H.R. 3101, to help ensure that the standards and legislation we won for access to broadcast TV, as well as to telecommunications 2 decades ago, are maintained. It is simply a matter of making sure that access reflects the changing landscape, which today includes broadband, the internet, wireless telephones, and handheld devices like iPhones, Blackberries, and PDAs. This is imperative that such technologies, because they did not exist back then when we won our hard-earned victory. In the end, it's really not rocket science. It's simply making sure that millions upon millions of Americans who are deaf, hard of hearing, or otherwise differently abled are not shut out because the content is not accessible, not available, or not affordable. As I said earlier, for whatever reason, it seems that all the hard work we did 20 years ago has virtually disappeared when it comes to updating access standards for broadband and the internet. Imagine this, Neil Armstrong watching a rebroadcast 20 years later, in 1989, of his first steps on the moon, only to find the words which he echoed across the globe, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," were no longer there. Erased, as if he had never been to the moon. Imagine that. That's how taking closed captions out of broadcast content now being shown on the internet feels like to millions of people like myself. I have always maintained that though I may be deaf, silence is the last thing the world will ever hear from me. I'll be making noise every day, whether it's on TV, in films, or in social media sites like Twitter. And in the end, I hope you will listen with your hearts. Remember that the real handicap of deafness does not lie in the ear, it lies in the mind. Please help us ensure that the minds of those who choose not to provide closed captions do not handicap us. Please help us ensure that they will listen. Finally, please help us ensure that the hard-fought victory we won so many years ago can move forward into the 21st century. Thank you so very much for allowing me to speak, And thank you for your time and interest.
Don't you wish that 300 million Americans could hear that presentation? I think that would move us miles and miles closer to the kind of accessibility and the kind of future that we're all working for. Having spokespersons that can speak out like that, having people with some celebrity to really highlight these issues is so important. And by the way, I think we have another person of some considerable celebrity in the audience today. I want to recognize Curtis Pride, who is in the audience, I understand. Curtis, can you stand up if you're here? Is he still here? There he is. Curtis, as you know, was the first deaf Major League Baseball player since 1945, I think, and is now Gallaudet's head baseball coach, and providing inspiration not just to athletes here, but to the student community here, to the community in which he lives, and to a lot of folks around the country. So we appreciate your being here with us too. The challenging job of following Marley Matlin falls to Mark Reichert, an attorney with more than 15 years of public policy and government relations experience in the vision loss and disability policy field. He serves as director of the American Foundation for the Blind's Public Policy Center. AFB, as many of you know, is a nonprofit organization that expands opportunities for people with vision loss. He is a well-known advocate before Congress, before the federal agencies, including the Federal Communications Commission, and we are most appreciative of him being with us today. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Copps. And you know, somebody asked me earlier today if I was nervous about making this presentation, and I had been up until the moment when you said, you know, admitting, yes, it's a challenge to follow Ms. Matlin. I know there must be at least one or two people in this audience who feel maybe just a little sorry for me that I have to follow. So I know that we're sharing a moment, and if I can ever be handed a microphone by Ms. Matlin again, I'll tell you, I think my life will be complete. I don't know that I need to do public policy anymore. My favorite role, I have to admit, for you was in The West Wing, and I also freely admit to being sort of a policy nerd. And one of the things that I really loved about that show was, and I think all of us who do public policy work at rock bottom know that this is true. The thing I loved about that show was that inevitably it was always the human factor, the human touch, the fact that real people who had, you know, wasn't so much tens of millions of folks who would experience a problem necessarily, but it was that one relationship that would bring an issue home or drive home a point, that would cut through some of the bureaucratic barriers that policymakers are facing. And I think that it would do us all good to look at a couple of those stories. I remember many years ago, it feels like many years to me, when video relay services were relatively novel, and I was attending a convention where video relay was being demonstrated, and there was an older couple. I understand that they were probably about in their 80s. They were from the Midwest, someplace, rural area. And they saw that they made a call using video relay service there at the convention, and the lady started simply to cry. She was moved to tears, and I remember her saying, obviously through an interpreter, "It's like Christmas time. Look, the interpreter's right there." That kind of personal experience cannot be summed up in words. And hopefully what this hearing and what the FCC can do moving forward in the development of a national broadband plan is to give that experience, that individual, life-changing, remarkable experience, to be able to communicate with other human beings, to give that to as many folks in this country as possible. It's my privilege today to be representing the American Foundation for the Blind and some 25 million Americans who say that they experience significant vision loss. They have trouble seeing even with eyeglasses and contacts. I am probably one of the rarer folks in our community in that I have virtually no usable vision. The vast majority of folks in our community have considerable usable vision, and many of them, frankly, don't even recognize that they are folks with visual impairments. You know, they're not blind; they just can't see too good, as they say. These are folks who we are benefiting from our efforts today, and they don't even know it. But a national broadband plan is not a national plan. It cannot be a national plan unless we ensure that to the maximum extent possible, services and equipment related to broadband are accessible to people with disabilities. How many times are we going to have to hear those individual stories about the student at the college campus who, while the rest of his classmates get the emergency alert via the text message, the text alert, that he can't read it because his cell phone will not read to him the text message? How many times are we going to have to hear the story about how impressive it is that there is more and more distance education available? And by the way, for folks who are blind and visually impaired, as is true for so many people with disabilities, transportation is got to be one of the most significant barriers we experience, and broadband can break down those barriers by bringing the data and therefore the service to that person. What do we do when that student can't access that distance education because the telecommunications service and the equipment that they're using is simply inaccessible? These are needless barriers, and we need to do something about it. And I know we're all confident that this commission, especially given the leadership that's been shown not only today but for some years now, especially by our distinguished commissioners present, we've got more hope than ever. Again, thank you very much for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here. Fabulous to follow you. And please remember that a national broadband plan needs to be national by making sure that accessibility is built into the services and equipment that are related to broadband. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Our next panelist is Ari Naiman, the founding president of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, a nonprofit organization of adults and youth on the autism spectrum. An expert already, he is also furthering his studies at the University of Maryland as a Sondheim Scholar of Public Affairs. He has been active in the autistic culture, neurodiversity, and disability rights movements for a number of years. He first became involved in self-advocacy as a high school student, arguing for his own inclusion and access to high-level academic coursework. We're pleased to have you here with us this morning, and the microphone is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank
Yes.
you very much. Before I begin, I just wanted to share a brief anecdote. It's an honor being on the stage with Ms. Matlin. When I told my mother earlier in the week that I would have the opportunity to testify on a panel with Marlee Matlin, she said, well, are you going to get a picture with her? And I said, well, I would love to, and that'd be great, but what I really want to do is to get her to reply to me on Twitter. She has over 28,000 followers. Well, thank you. That's an honor. I appreciate the opportunity to share the thoughts and the experiences of the autistic self-advocate community with the Commission. The autism spectrum is not often thought about in respect to disability access issues, in part because of the focus on early childhood and the lack of consideration very often of the very existences of adults on the autism spectrum. And yet, in a very real way, for those of us on the autism spectrum, the promise of online technologies has had a tremendous impact on our quality of life over the course of the last 2 decades. What we've seen is that in the past 15 years, online technologies have served a crucial role in the development of an independent autistic community and culture, in many of the areas in which we experience the most significant challenges, such as interpreting nonverbal communication and social cues, something that I personally I've always struggled with, are not as significant issues online. Difficulties that many of us have with real-time communication due to social anxiety and movement disorders that many of us struggle with are issues that can be addressed through the use of technology like forums and listservs. Basic online technology that's been available for quite some time, provided that access to the internet can be found for our population. And perhaps the most important thing and the most under-recognized thing in regards to improving outcomes for people with disabilities and adults on the autism spectrum because of the social communication challenges we face is having the opportunity to connect with other adults on the spectrum and to find a sense of community, to have an understanding that we are not alone in this world. According to Martin Decker, one of the early pioneers in the autistic self-advocate community, the online autistic community has been a tremendous resource for shared support, for improving independent living skills, and really for the creation of an effective autistic space where we can form a sense of identity, where we can form a sense of culture, independent of the parent-dominated autism world. And while we appreciate our parent allies, very often the focus on early childhood has led to a lack of consideration of our issues. So the space that online technologies have created there has been tremendously important in creating a support system defined by and for our needs. According to the Pew Internet and American Life Project, although people with disabilities in general, and we are no exception here by virtue of our similar underemployment and unemployment and exclusion from the labor force in many instances, are less likely to have access to the internet. At the same time, we are more likely to have a more significant benefit to our quality of life as a result of access to broadband technologies than people without disabilities, in part because some of the issues that were mentioned earlier in regards to transportation and similar other concerns. Growing up on the autism spectrum, being bounced from school to school, spending time in segregated and inclusive educational environments, I experienced this myself because at the same time as I did not have access to a peer group, at the same time as the social environment in the schools I was being placed in was inaccessible to me, by virtue of the fact that the online communities of adults on the spectrum and people with the particular focused interests that I, like many other adults on the spectrum, possess, were present, that gave me an opportunity to engage socially and to have access to those types of things and to have access to the kind of support that eventually made it possible for me to return to an inclusive setting, for me to go to college, and for me to found a national self-advocacy organization. And in respect to the obstacles that our community continues to face on this, I realize I see I have relatively little time left.
That's okay. Just keep going.
I just want to highlight two in particular. The primary difficulty we face is respect to financial access. One of the things we would very much like to see is to see the universal service funds, as have been proposed in the 21st Century Communication and Video Accessibility Act, be made available for providing broadband connection and service for people with disabilities. And in addition to that, we also just want to send a message that it's very important to recognize that because so many of us have auditory processing disorder difficulties as well, concerns around captioning and transcription are also relevant for our population too. Our community is often not traditionally thought of in these considerations, so we very much appreciate the invitation to share our perspective, and it's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much. Our next speaker is Dale Hatfield. He's the Executive Director of the Silicon Flatiron Center for Law and Technology and Entrepreneurship at the University of Colorado at Boulder, also a professor in the Interdisciplinary Telecommunications Program. Among other positions, many other positions that he has held, he previously served as the Chief of the Office of Engineering and Technology at our Federal Communications Commission. He has over 4 decades of experience in telecommunications policy and regulation and spectrum management and many other areas. And I can't really begin to tell you the breadth of expertise and good judgment that this good man brings to everything that he does. But I can tell you that he has made simply enormous contributions to all of us with his stellar work throughout the years, and he is contributing mightily to our work on the development of a National Broadband Plan just now. He's also a wonderful friend. So welcome, Dale. I know you were here for our last disabilities workshop just a week or so ago. We appreciate your coming back at a time when I know it's not easy for you to travel, and we are both pleased and proud to welcome you here this morning.
Yeah. Good morning, and thanks very much, Commissioner Copps, for that kind introduction, and also for inviting me here today to offer my thoughts at this field hearing on broadband access for people with disabilities. And of course, it's a real pleasure to be here before Commissioners McDowell and Clyburn as well. As I mentioned at the earlier roundtable discussions held last month, and as Commissioner Copps mentioned today, I once worked for FCC Chairman Bill Kennard as Chief of the Office of Engineering and Technology at the agency. In that role in the late 1990s, I was actively involved in disability access issues. And as a technologist, I was fascinated by the promise of internet-based services and equipment to improve the lives of people with disabilities. But I was also exposed to potential problems that arise when disability access requirements are not considered in the early stages of network and equipment, end-user equipment design. With regard to the latter, the challenge is I was directly involved in the TTY digital cell phone compatibility issue. Indeed, I vividly remember meetings between the wireless industry representatives of the deaf and hard and hearing community, and academics right here in this very building. While I was impressed by the sincere efforts of those trying to fix the problem after the fact, I was appalled that the problem had not been anticipated and resolved when it should have been at the earliest stages of product specification and design. Now, despite my interest in work in the disability access area while at the Commission in the late 90s, I confess, as I did at the earlier roundtable session, that I did not fully appreciate the importance until my wife was diagnosed with ALS, or it is more commonly known, Lou Gehrig's disease, shortly after I retired from government in the year 2000. ALS is a motor neuron disease that progressively causes muscle weakness and atrophy throughout the body. Fortunately, while ALS is a terminal disease, in my wife's case, the progression, the initial loss of both strength in her limbs and fine motor skills, has been relatively slow. Albeit with increasing difficulty, she has been able to use the resources available on or via the internet to early on gain a better understanding of the medical aspects of the disease, 2, to communicate with others with the disease and with their caregivers, to get and provide tips on dealing with the daily challenges that the disease presents. 3, to communicate regularly with friends and relatives to reduce feelings of isolation. 4, to continue manage, thank goodness, most of the household finances. 5th, to shop online and even have books in one of the national newspapers delivered to her e-book every morning. And 6th and finally, to participate in online courses and discussions, to thus keeping her intellectually engaged and helping meet her spiritual needs. I can say without hesitation or reservation that access to the internet is absolutely a crucial factor in her well-being. While some of the activities I just described do not require broadband access per se, many of them do. But in all cases, the online experience is greatly enhanced by the higher data rates associated with broadband, and is obviously that will be increasingly true in the future. On this panel, we were asked to testify on experience, opportunities, and barriers. I have already spoken briefly about our experience with ALS in our family, and as she is so slowly weakened by this disease. I'd like to just comment very briefly in the minute that I have first on one barrier and then on the opportunity. And the barrier is that I continue to see, we're running sort of an experiment at home in the sense that she weakens daily. So I can watch her needs change in terms of the accessibility needs that she has. And you know, it just clearly, I don't have time to go into it in any depth, but clearly we must do better to, as I said before, at the outset, and as Commissioner Clyburn said, at the outset, have providers of internet-based services and end-user equipment early on consider those requirements. Indeed, I think it's a moral obligation, and of course a legal obligation, should be a strong legal obligation as well. I'm really pleased that the Commission has taken the steps in this hearing, and I would urge them to continue to use the power of the bully pulpit or jawboning to continually remind service providers and equipment vendors of their moral and legal obligations, and to back that up with strong enforcement for those who don't get the message. I want to mention, I'm out of time, but I did want to mention some of the concepts that were talked about at the panel in terms of setting up a center of some sort that would sort of step up our commitment to disability access by setting up a center that would bring together service providers, equipment vendors, government agencies, consumer groups to share best practices, gain a better understanding of evolving consumer needs, expanding awareness of the technology possibilities which are so great, and generally promote innovation in the broadband access space. This possibility was discussed at some length at the earlier roundtable, and I support it strongly. So thank you again. I really appreciate the opportunity to appear here this morning.
Thank you very much, Dale. Your time is precious, and you're very generous to share it with us. Next, we will hear from Jay Wyant, who is president of the Alexander Graham Bell Association for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. After graduating from Stanford University and teaching high school for a while, he has gone on to a career in marketing and computer-based training. He now heads up his own startup venture and devotes a lot of his private time to volunteering on the boards of various service organizations for the deaf and for the hard of hearing. He works hard and he works well to open doors of opportunity for folks with hearing loss. We thank him for being with us today, and we'd like to hear from him now.
Thank you. Before we start the clock, can you make sure that everybody can hear me okay? The captain can follow me? Thank you. I'm recovering from a cold, but I couldn't bear to not be on the panel with Bonnie Matlin. So, please, can you hear me okay? Good, thank you. I was born deaf, and I grew up walking 5 miles each way uphill to school. I conducted all of my education without closed captioning or classroom accommodation, beginning way back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. So why do I care about accessibility? Did I do well enough without it? Well, when I first had CART, services for meetings and conferences, I realized how much information I had been missing. By the same token, my inability to use the phone closed a lot of doors during the 80s and 90s, doors that are only now slowly opening when, like Miss Matlin, I jammed my foot through them. For my generation, 50 is truly the new 30, as we continue to leverage the many wonderful benefits of laws such as the Telecommunications Act, the ADA, the Rehabilitation Act, and so on, and the new technology of email, IM, and texting. All of these are truly a boon. But functional equivalent is still a dream. Broadband, reliable, universally accessible broadband is a key foundation for innovative, useful technologies and services that enable people with disabilities to truly contribute to their abilities. Consider that broadband-based services have largely replaced TTYs as a means for the deaf and hard of hearing to make and receive calls. Video relay service has mushroomed in popularity, but it remains tethered to the desktop. I can't just make a call on the spot wherever I am. So when we talk about broadband, we're talking both about traditional internet services and so-called 3G and 4G wireless services. Quality of service is key. There needs to be a way to measure and document what you get. When I contact Comcast to tell them that my cable modem is crawling along at 1.5 kilobytes per second, their answer is, it all looks good on their end. The bells set the standard for a guaranteed dial tone. We need a 21st century approach, whether through industry, regulation, or a third way, to ensure the same via broadband. When I'm doing a phone interview with a prospective employer or calling a potential client for my new company using broadband technology, you can't expect me to start the conversation with so many caveats, such as, I'm using a relay service. If the relay video freezing or the call drop, I'll be back. I may sound like a woman, but really I'm a total dude. Who in normal industry has that sort of time or empathy to receive such a call? Let's talk about how broadband can impact the educational environment, particularly for people with disabilities. Deafness, as we all know, is a low incidence disability despite being the most prevalent birth defect. Yet there's a long history of families with deaf children, including Helen Keller, moving to be near an appropriate school or hiring private tutors, a tradition which continues to this day. But this leaves out so many others, even in this FAPE, functionally free and appropriate public education world. For example, what about children in the rural areas? What about people who don't have access to those technologies or those services and can't afford to move? Imagine using reliable, affordable broadband service to enable teachers in those rural areas who don't have any specialty to consult with other professionals at center-based areas or take courses. Imagine parents and their children using home broadband to supplement parent-infant programs and language development programs. Reliable, affordable broadband service is a key infrastructure to better opportunity in education, support resources, and communication access, critical factor for the lives of individuals, families, and their community. I think I'm out of time. So thank you very much, and thanks again for having me here.
Our final panelist on panel number one is Elizabeth Spires, who is Director of Information Services for the American Association of the Deaf Blind, AADB, which is a national consumer organization of, by, and for people who have both vision and hearing losses. The mission of AADB is to ensure that all deaf-blind persons achieve their maximum potential through increased independence and productivity and integration into the community. Her organization conducts multiple activities to breathe life into this goal. She is a very effective advocate, and by the way, one of her college degrees is from Gallaudet, so we welcome her home today.
Hello, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here with all of you today. I would like to describe a little bit about the AADB membership and the people who belong to the organization. The word deaf-blind can be used to mean fully deaf and fully blind, but we have a diverse membership of people who have varieties of hearing loss and vision loss. Some people say they are blind and have hearing loss. Other people say they are deaf and have vision loss. Other people are fully deaf and blind. Some people grew up with these conditions, and other people experienced them later in life. They come from different backgrounds and have different communication needs. Some of them prefer to use American Sign Language. Some of them speak and depend on their hearing and vision. They all have different needs at different times in their lives. Often we make some assumptions about the numbers in this population. We would estimate that about 1.2 million people in the United States have vision and hearing loss. Not all of these are fully deaf and blind, but some are. We estimate that today about 60% of the people using broadband, if they were given reliable access, it would result in an increase of that number to 70 or 80%. That would be in broadband, internet, email access, and being in touch with other people and being in touch with the world. Today, deafblind people experience many challenges in access to broadband services. One of the important challenges is the equipment itself. It needs to be accessible equipment so that it provides access to things like the internet. People who are deaf and blind need communication devices which change the information into Braille. These communication devices can cost upwards of $10,000, and that doesn't even include the computer. There's some new technology which is called a deaf-blind communicator, a DBC. It looks a little bit like a pager, and it can be used as a TTY or for internet access, and it can be connected to another machine called Braille Notes, which allows a deaf-blind person to receive information in Braille and to communicate with other people who are hearing and who don't know Braille or sign language. That, in addition, would cost $8,000. In different states, there are different technology programs that can provide some assistance. Some states loan the equipment to deaf-blind people as long as they need them, but some deaf-blind people do not know about the services available, and they can't afford to purchase the equipment on their own. Marley Mattman recently made the comment that deaf people did not have access to captions. But even with a computer, there are other issues with the equipment that prevent deaf-blind people from gaining access. Often they need additional training. It can be hard to learn to use the equipment, and they may have to get an interpreter for that training. So there are many issues for deaf-blind individuals in getting access to the training and in getting the equipment that they need. Also, there are some other critical challenges. What if the equipment breaks down? What happens then? One of our members used a Braille Note device, and it broke down. Therefore, she had no access to her email or the internet for 3 months. It took 3 months in order to get the equipment repaired because the device could not easily be fixed. So that presents another challenge. We need to maintain access to the equipment and then keep the equipment repaired. Another issue we have is that sometimes we are able to use the computer but not able to access the websites. There are many beautiful pictures that are available on the websites, but without a web screen reader, those are hard to access. And another area of access for deaf-blind people has to do with relay services. There are different kinds of relay services. One is a text-based relay service, and the other is a video relay service. These text-based services, such as IP relay or net talk, allow you to call another person on the computer. And for a deafblind person, through use of a change in fonts or the background colors, an individual with vision loss may be able to access these kinds of services with special software for large print. And some deafblind people can also access other services if they have a computer with a Braille device connected, so that allows them to access these text-based relay services. Without those, it would be very difficult for them. Now, when it comes to video relay services, deaf and hard of hearing people with low vision can access the video relay services being provided. But at the same time, the interpreters often need more training in order to accommodate the specific needs of individuals with low vision. Some interpreters may need to spell more slowly or need to use clothing of a certain color. You notice today that the interpreters I'm working with are dressed in black. I requested that because it allows me to see them better. That's not always possible for a video relay service interpreter. So we need to educate interpreters about these needs. For persons who are fully deafblind, they're not able to see the television screen, they're not able to see the interpreter on the screen. And so we need to figure out some way to provide access to that service. One of the best ways for people with no vision is to bring in someone we would call a communication facilitator, which I will abbreviate as a CF. It simply means a person who can act as an interpreter between the interpreter on the television screen and the deafblind person in the room. So they would sit with the deafblind individual and communicate what they are seeing on the screen to the individual. But, of course, many video relay services don't provide the communication facilitator, meaning it's impossible for the deafblind individuals to access those services. So we need additional options for services that video relay services companies could provide. We can advertise and encourage deaf-blind people to use broadband services. But we then need to make broadband services accessible for deaf-blind people in general. And I'm happy to work with different organizations such as the FCC, who are encouraging the coordination of services to make these programs available for all people. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you to all our panelists for what I think were really good and penetrating and heartfelt comments on experiences and opportunities and barriers. Being in Washington, we're already beyond the time where we are supposed to be, but I think it was worthwhile to hear everybody out. I have some questions now from the audience that I would like the panel to consider. We'll have more questions to be taken after panel 2, and maybe we'll be able to spend a little more time then. I don't want to unduly hold up the next panel from getting on, but we do want to handle some of these questions. One of them is, and I'll ask just one or two volunteers on the panel maybe to follow up on this, how big a problem is lack of knowledge or reluctance to use new technologies in the disability community? And I think it's a good question, because as Blair and his team and all of us work on crafting a broadband plan, it's not just how do you get these technologies out to people, but how do you make sure that people understand the potential and the need for them. And I'd like to get some guidance, and I think the questioner for this, on how big a part of our attention that should occupy as we craft a broadband plan. Really, what kind of emphasis do we need to put on making sure the demand is there? And I can see the demand is here today and in this room, but just looking at the disabilities communities across the country, is this a problem? Who would like to try to answer that? Please.
Okay. It's me? Okay. I think it's a huge issue. For example, parents of deaf children don't expect their child to be deaf, so they have no background in hearing loss or a technology issue until after the child is born. They had a lot of learning, a lot of catching up to do on that. So right there is one big issue for lack of knowledge and lack of awareness. Another issue is that a lot of people who are deaf and hard of hearing are mainstream. They function in the world. They don't necessarily think of themselves that way. As Elizabeth pointed out, and as Mark pointed out, a lot of the members or people who wouldn't be members don't think of themselves as blind or deaf, but they're out there and they need resources. And then there are the people who are older, people who may refuse to wear hearing aids. By the same token, they may refuse or be afraid of using new technologies. So all of those people need to have a way to have the technology made simple, made comfortable, made easy to use. And again, as I said before, reliable and affordable. So that's where the big problem.
Sorry. Mark, please.
Thanks. While I would never want to say that we should discourage, educating folks about new technologies, my fear is that the emphasis would be placed more on that than on the reality that there is, I think, a wide understanding of what the potential of technology has and what technologies are available. Some of our industry friends are right when they say that there has been some innovation and there's some very cool technologies that are accessible, but it's nowhere near the level of accessibility that we need. And I believe, Commissioner Copps, as you put it, when we look at it from the standpoint of civil rights, it certainly is not the plethora of technology that we certainly deserve as a matter of right to have access to. I think people with disabilities, as we all do, living with family members, friends, I think we know all too keenly what it is we cannot do with existing technologies. And what we need is to break down the barriers that we run into every day.
Marla, let me ask you what you are such an expert in communicating in this, and you've had so much experience around the country. Are there some kind of specific outreach proposals you would recommend to not just to the Commission, but to the government, generally speaking, that would be more successful?
No, I think it's as simple as just listening. I think really just reaching out and listening. Just listen to what people have to say. It's all that's needed. Listen and think about what these people have to say. Communication is vital. And approach it with an open mind. Simple as that.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question.
Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I'm sorry?
Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I have one thought, if I may.
Sure.
I think in respect to sort of our arena, there are two broad populations. The one population which tends to be younger and more verbal and more associated with the Asperger's syndrome and the diagnoses that are referred to as high functioning, which generally does not have significant difficulty in terms of adopting the new technology. And then there's also the population of adults on the spectrum and with developmental disabilities in general that have intellectual disabilities and are more likely to be receiving more intensive service provision needs. And I do think it's important that we consider, just like we're considering this in regards to transportation policy and in regards to sexuality education and so on, the need for well, in this instance, digital literacy programs specifically geared to those populations, because I think that's a population that's often left behind in terms of consideration of is there an understanding of how this technology works? Is there an access to that?
I think that's a wonderful suggestion. The whole idea and the concept of media literacy is one I think our country needs to take so much more seriously than it does. And I've always been convinced that at just about every level of education there's something valuable to teach. and teaching all of our citizens, kids growing up from elementary school right through secondary school, on how to use these new technologies and also to protect them against how these technologies can abuse them is important. But also part of that kind of education through the years is to acquaint everybody with the special challenges that face the disabilities community. So it's kind of a hotbed of contention. You know, how much does the federal government get involved in education? But it seems to me we ought to be able to figure some ways that we could be producing material, maybe putting it up on the internet in this modern age and letting school boards decide if they want to use it or something. I don't know. Maybe we can have a more aggressive posture than that. But I hope our broadband plan really gets into media literacy. A final question, and I think we'll take a break. I think this one goes to affordability. Can you talk more about the challenges in getting broadband services and how cost barriers are preventing access to these basic telecommunications services? I'd like to talk a little bit about affordability.
Anybody else? I could speak to that. It remains a very significant problem, particularly in rural areas, particularly for low-income areas, you know, as I think is expected. But at the same time, I think there's ample precedent. If we look at what's done with landline phones, if we look at what's being done in terms of getting internet access to the libraries and to the school systems, to utilize some of those same funding streams to address that. I think the legislation that I mentioned earlier has some possibility in respect to that. And I know there are a lot of innovative proposals that are being put forward. I do think that it's important that we keep in mind that there are a number of disability access considerations, but a number of broader financial access considerations that are going to be just as significant.
Good.
I'd also like to add that people who live in rural areas don't necessarily have the affordability or access able to use video phones, for example, because the broadband access isn't there. Cable costs may be high, they may not be able to afford them. So certainly we have to take into consideration income levels of individuals with disabilities in order to deal with the issue.
Yes, sir. Good.
Part of the issue it's also not only cable costs are high, but often there's only one provider in the rural area. So there's no competition. So the provider can bring the prices up to a fairly high level. So I don't know how to solve that without, but that's the main issue, the affordability, because of lack of competition in the rural areas.
Mark, did you have a comment?
Just a quick one. You know, we're often told that we can approach this whole matter of accessibility in two ways. We can either build in accessibility into the products and services directly that are riding the internet, or the person with a disability can acquire a piece of assistive technology, a specialized device. I use one, I use several. I'm a big fan of assistive technology, but an approach that relies exclusively or primarily on letting somebody else carry the accessibility concern essentially adds in a substantial cost. People with disabilities under that scenario are going to see unbelievable expenses that others wouldn't. So I think when we look at affordability, in my mind, the question of the accessibility of the equipment and the services is inextricably bound to the question of affordability, because the less that those accessibility features are built in from the get-go, the more the costs will be incurred by the folks with disabilities who need to acquire assistive technology, which may or may not work with those equipment and services.
Well, thank you very much. I think this has been a wonderful discussion on experiences and opportunities, and I think we've teed up some barriers to talk about in the next panel now, whether they're barriers of cost or even literacy, or the communities not being included in the design of equipment when it's being developed, general awareness of the public, lack of a sense of urgent attention from government, rural-urban divide, maybe a lack of competition. So we will take a 10-minute break, and then we will come back and talk about solutions to all of these problems. But can you all join me in another round of applause for a wonderful panel presentation? We're going to take just a 10-minute break, no more than that, because I know we're behind schedule. We want to get to more questions at the end of the next panel, so if you can all be back in 10 minutes, it would be great.
Will the second panel come up, please?
Good job, sir. You're good on that. Very good.
We should get started. Where's Donald?
Oh, thank you. That's great.
Is he in the green room? No, they're all here. I don't. No, we just can't find it.
Not that would be useful, sorry.
Okay. George, do you have to flip the cameras?
Good, good. We're in Arlington.
All right, we're going to start the second panel in 1 minute.
try to assemble in the next minute or two, please? That went up and... Folks, can I ask you to take your places so we can begin?
Will everybody please take their seat? Take a seat. Ready to start our second panel?
You got some good ones?
We have a lot of questions on access for broadband programming, including closed caption audio description.
Right. To what extent?
No, we have authority, so.
I shouldn't ask that one.
No. Karen is promoting that in the Marquis Downs and Murphy Bill does
I'll
it.
ask her about that. Where's Karen?
At the end.
Oh, that's fine. Okay. Now, are we in this order, Patrick? We got out of order last time.
Oh, really? Patrick and Patrick,
And
yes.
Patrick.
And
Alan. Lisa's not here.
not here.
Crow and Karen. Okay. Oh, that's, yeah. Oh, that's an official.
Okay.
yeah, thank you for coming in. Oh, yeah. Thanks for coming.
We get started here. Okay.
Where were those? Oh, there they are. Okay.
We have, you'll say the next.
Okay, my thanks to those who remain now. We've teed up the barriers, so this is going to be the really interesting part where we come up with some solutions and recommendations. I want to welcome all of our panelists. Our first panelist is Patrick Timoney, is an adaptive technology librarian in the Adaptive Services Division of the DC Public Library. They're doing some really innovative and creative things there. I know a little bit about them, but I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about them this morning. He's another one of those people who's making a real difference in people's lives, and we are delighted he could take some time to come out here and be with us today and offer us some information on what he's doing and maybe a recommendation or two. So, Patrick?
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Patrick Timoney. Again, I'm the Adaptive Technology Librarian at DC Public Library. I'm going to read a little statement about our library. DC Public Library promotes access to learning, communication, and information resources for all of our customers. And on behalf of our Chief Librarian, Jenny Cooper, and my supervisor, Venetia Dempson, we are honored to participate in this important hearing today. The Adaptive Services Division is charged with promoting system access to programs and services through arranging American Sign Language interpretation services, deaf culture programming, and free American Sign Language classes, large print, braille, and audio formats and programs, and an adaptive technology program, which includes adaptive software that's networked throughout the system, and also technology literacy programming. So broadband internet access is essential to a number of our services that we provide at the library, and those include downloadable audiobooks, ebooks, videos and music, video relay service, video phone and VRS, audio and video conferencing and archiving capability, audio and video training in the use of adaptive technologies. We have an archive online of audio of training in adaptive technologies, and then, of course, internet access to all of the rich internet applications. So let me tell you a little bit about my adaptive technology program that I do at the library. There's 3 things we do. Again, we have a lab where we have a whole list of technologies, softwares, and hardwares. For instance, the JAWS screen reader, and the Magic Screen Magnifier, and a list. I've got a list that is up online. Goes on for a couple of pages anyway, of all the technologies that we have. So we have that in our lab at the Martin Luther King Library, and then we also have networked softwares out at all the branch libraries, and those include 4 basic softwares: magnification, screen reading, scanning and reading, and a learning differences solution. So that's our hardware. Our lab, and the branches technologies that we have at the branches. We also have a demo collection with technologies like the PackMate for people who are deafblind, and we have free computers that we work with a nonprofit called Project Reboot in Rockville to get people free computers, and we have a learning lab with a loop amplification system, a smart board, and a gaming facility. We also got a volunteer training program so that if people need to learn to use the adaptive technologies, we can set them up with volunteer trainers. And and we're working on a curriculum so that we can certify people to be volunteer trainers. And then finally, we do programming around adaptive technology, and that includes our Saturday technology training sessions, which we record in audio and video and put up online. And there's a chance for people in the community to share information, so vendors to do demos, or people who have been successful using adaptive technology to come in and share stories with each other. And we also have a professional networking group of the universities and public libraries in the area who do adaptive technologies. And then we've got something new, which is, I guess I'm going to call it user-generated conferences, like Accessibility Camp DC. And those are going really well. So come down and visit the library. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We've got Patrick and Patrick coming up here. Our next Patrick is Patrick Howley, who's the Government Affairs Director for the National Emergency Number Association, NENA. And as many of you know, some of you may not, NENA spends much of its time on public safety issues, and particularly 911 emergency services. And as we get into the broadband era, it's becoming crystal clear that we really have to figure a way to develop the potentials of this technology to enhance public safety of all of our citizens. And certainly we had another demonstration yesterday of the need for quick, swift public communications, public safety warnings and all. And in Texas, it seems we have these episodes where there are public safety dangers almost every week. So it's an important priority of the Commission. And Patrick is an advocate for the rights of millions of people in the United States who are really looking for more innovative solutions to access emergency communications, and I do believe that's probably what he's going to talk about today.
Thank you, Commissioner Copps, and to the FCC and Gallaudet for hosting this meeting. I want to talk about a couple of issues in terms of some of the limitations we have today and what we're trying to do to fix those limitations for 911 for access for individuals with disabilities. I noted on a panel a week or two ago that while sometimes technology lags for individuals with disabilities, it's kind of the opposite for 911, because the technologies that particularly the deaf and hard of hearing, are using text-based communications, video communications, you're ahead of the curve compared to the non-hearing, to the hearing population, who was a little slower to adopt text-based and video-based communications. At the same time, the 911 system was historically, and still today, is a voice-based system. The only text we can take is via TTY, and of course, less and less people use TTY. And so we have a very limited E911 system. We've made some progress, thanks to the FCC and a lot of the folks in this room. We're now able to have access to 911 via relay services, video relay and IP relay. And that was a good development, but it's still indirect access to 911. We still don't have direct text-based communications other than a TTY into the 911 system. We don't have any video communications into the 911 system for anybody. And so we have limitations. But recognizing that, NINA, my organization, which is a national nonprofit 911 public safety group, we've made it a priority, and a lot of other people have too, within the industry, within public safety, within the 911 community and government, to modernize the 911 system, to move our 911 system away from the old telephone network system that can pretty much only handle voice and a tiny bit of data, to an IP-based, broadband-enabled system. And one of the drivers, I would say the primary driver for that, is to improve access to the 911 system for individuals with disabilities. We want to ensure that we can accept text directly into the 911 system. We want to ensure that we can accept video directly into the 911 system so that you don't have to go through a relay service, or that we can simultaneously have the 911 center and the relay provider and the caller all together looking with the same video. The same is true for images and other data. In a nutshell, we're trying to move it to a next-generation IP-based, broadband-enabled system. And we're making some progress. We're doing a lot of work on developing the standards. Just this week, we had what we call an industry collaboration event, where we had a lot of vendors come together to work on testing out this next-generation 911 system. And it is technologically possible, but it's not easy. There's a lot of challenges to get us there in terms of funding and policy issues that have to be addressed. But it's the future of 911 is a system that is much more accessible, and I'm confident that we can get there. And one of the things I think is beautiful about this is that as we move towards an IP-based 911 system, all of the things that we're doing to enable text into 911, video into 911, images, photos into 911, none of which can be done today, benefits everybody. It doesn't just benefit a deaf or hard of hearing individual. It benefits all of us. I mean, this is how teenage people communicate with text more than they talk now, or instant message. That's another technology we're trying to enable. And so as we improve our 911 system, I think what we'll be doing less and less is developing standalone systems that only work for the deaf and hard of hearing population, and therefore there's not a market for it. What we're going to be doing is improving the system that works for everybody, which at the same time solves the accessibility issue for individuals with disabilities, and I'm really excited about that. I think what's critical is that broadband as a technology is essential for every aspect in the chain of getting help to somebody in an emergency, in a situation where there's a deaf or hard of hearing individual, an individual with a disability. One, the 911 system itself has to have broadband. All the 911 centers need to be connected to broadband, because if we're not, we can't set up a system that enables text and video and images into 911. So there's broadband on the 911 system side. The consumers need broadband. They need video capabilities. They need to have services that enable them to communicate in ways that can be effective into 911. So the caller, the 911 system, and then we need to be able to share that information, including video, directly with the responders in the field. So you need mobile broadband for first responders. So broadband is really the crux of the issue. It really brings everything all together to improving emergency response for individuals with disabilities. That's true for emergency alerting from the government to individuals with disabilities as well. So what can the FCC do? I think we need to make sure that broadband IP-based 911 systems are a national United States policy objective for emergency communications. The FCC can provide leadership on the 911 system itself. And what I mean by that is not just being a regulatory agency that puts requirements on companies that sell service to consumers, but doing that while also providing leadership so the 911 system within the states simultaneously improves so that the whole system can work. And of course, innovative ideas for funding will go a long way. Thank you.
That's a huge problem you tee up, and the FCC is going to have an opportunity by February 17th to really start setting the direction on this and really come with some plans. So we thank you for that. Alan Hubbard is the Chief Operating Officer at the National Telecommuting Institute. That's a nonprofit organization that's a leader in providing virtual contact center services and providing Americans with disabilities with at-home job placements too. He's a 25-year veteran in the technology and contact center space, worked for Hewlett-Packard and a number of other companies, and is a person really of truly wide practical experience, and I'm looking forward to hearing from him then.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for inviting us. I appreciate it, from the college also. As the Commissioner said, we're a nonprofit organization. We were founded in 1995, and our mission is to identify and develop at-home jobs for Americans with physical disabilities. We place them in jobs such as medical transcriptionists and call center agents. In 2009, NTI will place over 400 Americans with disabilities. Since 2000, we've placed and managed over 2,800 at-home workers. Our goal over the next 2 years is to double that yearly number. And it really is a bit of a daunting task. Our population is about 5 million that we can reach out to, but reaching out to them becomes more difficult every day for us. Broadband is key to our success and key to our employees' success. Each of our MTs, the medical transcriptionists and call center agents, work from home. They have PCs within their home office, a phone, and broadband access to the internet. Our clients require that. Our employees are homebound. They can't leave their houses. So they need to have this type of access. They're dependent upon broadband access for fast and easy access to the internet. Without it, they couldn't do their jobs. We offer this in two flavors, really, two solutions. One is a completely outsourced solution where we provide the technology, the professional services, and the staffing for the call center or for the medical transcription. We also provide a staffing service where we'll provide the people and also the training as part of that. So this is a really attractive solution that NTI offers to both the medical offices and the call centers because of the power of our business model. We're offering them an innovative and cost-efficient method of staffing. We help them lower their costs. We reduce their carbon footprint. They don't have to have people in the offices. People aren't driving there, heat, electricity, etc. We have the expertise in launching a virtual contact center. We've been doing it for almost 15 years. We started doing it when the common word was teleworking. Now it's the virtual contact center. We have qualified agents, trained transcriptionists. I mean, most of our transcriptionists have about 20 years experience. Now, because of their disability, a lot of our agents require significant screening, testing, and training to help them get back into the workforce. So we also provide that as a capability. And we're outsourcing to American citizens. So we're giving these jobs that are may be outsourced overseas to American citizens. We do this within 50 states. We take the administration burden off of our clients. So as you might imagine, within the virtual world where you have different state, local, and unemployment taxes, we take on those responsibilities for our clients and manage that through them. We've done this for some of the largest government agencies and corporations in the U.S. For example, we have over 120 agents at the IRS alone. NTI and its home workers provide companies with qualified and cost-effective solutions. We're able to place hundreds of Americans with disabilities each year. The advances in technology allow companies to utilize and manage these distributed workers. It's pretty safe to say that without broadband access to the internet, these at-home workers would not be able to do their jobs today. And for that matter, they might not even have jobs. So we appreciate your support, and thank you for having us.
Thank you. I should point out, I think if you have programs for this, you'll notice that we're absent one panelist up here. We were supposed to have Elise Hamlin, the Director of Public Policy and State Development at the Hearing Loss Association of America. And I'm sad to have to report that she suffered a death in her family, so she is unable to be with us today. We miss having her here. We want her to know that she's in our thoughts and prayers at this very difficult time for her. So we will move on to our next panelist, and that would be Dr. Janice Crow, who is Vice President of the Employment Services Division of the Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation, where she oversees day-to-day operations of the division with responsibility for vocational assessment and training and career placement departments. She's a certified assistive technology practitioner, a 25-year member of the Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology Society of North America. Again, another person with a vast array of knowledge, and we thank her for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Copps. It is truly an honor and a privilege to participate in this hearing. I come to you today to speak about computer training programs for people with disabilities. Now, these programs provide solutions that cut across many of the topic areas of interest. They use assistive technologies, they provide education, job training, and employment. Today I represent not only the School of Adaptive Computer Training, a program of the Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation located in Wichita, Kansas, in the heartland, but also computer training programs across the country through the Association of Rehabilitation Programs in Computer Technology. Now, my perspective comes from experience with the School of Adaptive Computer Training. This program was developed to provide computer training and employment opportunities to people with disabilities in information technology. A key point I would like to make, and one that you will hear over and over throughout this presentation, is the importance of partnerships. In 2000, the school was opened in Wichita, Kansas, and from the outset, there was involvement by private sector partners, including Digital Consulting and Software Services of Houston, Texas, and EDS Corporation, headquartered in Plano, Texas. These two corporations assisted us in our program development, and members of the Wichita business community continue to guide and direct our curriculum. Program operation has been made possible through federal grants, one from the Department of Education, Rehabilitation Services Administration, and another from the Department of Labor, Employment and Training Administration. Over the years, we've provided training not only in Wichita, Kansas, but also Houston, New Orleans, and Atlanta. We've had over 1,000 graduates of our training programs, but not all have been people with disabilities. We also provide training to low-income individuals who are on cash assistance through the TANF program. Through our latest partnership, we're serving youth with disabilities. This one partners with the Wichita School District and Workforce Development. We provide training and certification in Microsoft Office products. The school district and Workforce Development split the costs, and the students get high school credit for their training. Now, as the economy and job market have changed, so have our courses. Today we offer courses in computing fundamentals, a certification course in Microsoft Office products, and an income tax preparation course in partnership with H&R Block. Our Microsoft courses lead to industry-recognized certifications, and students can take those online certification exams on our campus in our own certification testing center. Now, broadband access is important to our training, but it's critical to the employment component of our programs. It's been stated before, not having broadband access now means not having access to jobs. So people with disabilities need broadband access to look for work, and they also need the digital literacy skills to do so. So a plan needs to include outreach and training component in order to obtain broadband adoption from those who may have the most to gain. Now, before I close, I need to speak to you on behalf of the Association of Rehabilitation Programs in Computer Technology. ARPCT was founded in 1977 with the support and guidance of IBM. Over the years, member programs have trained an estimated 18,000 IT professionals with disabilities to become tax-paying citizens. During this time, ARPCT has represented 175 community and state-based programs for people with disabilities. It's another public-private partnership, one that's included state vocational rehabilitation, community colleges, and a wide variety of national, state, and local organizations for people with disabilities. It's also included Western Michigan University and a key private sector partner, Skillsoft Incorporated, a provider of online learning for many large corporations as well as the federal government. Now, for the past 10 years, Skillsoft has donated access to much of its online learning libraries and learning management system to people with disabilities and the professionals who serve them, who are also ARPCT members. This includes free access to state-of-the-industry career training and career advancement modules, live video, simulation. High-speed broadband connections are required to make full use of the rich content. Thus, we urge the FCC to help ARPCT and others to reach those in need of life-changing opportunities by supporting not only the development and access to affordable high-speed broadband in all parts of this nation, but also the training in how to use it. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Our next panelist, Karen Pell-Strauss, is one of my favorite people in the world. She is my friend. She is also the friend of every person in this room, given the kind of productive work that she has done over her career. She is the co-chair and founder of the Coalition of Organizations for Accessible Technology, which works day in, day out to ensure disability access to the tools of modern communication. In addition to serving as a great resource for me, she's considered one of the nation's leading legal advocates for telecommunications access. She literally wrote the book on it, a book called A New Civil Right, Telecommunications Equality for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Americans, which is really must-reading. She has served as Deputy Bureau Chief in our Consumer Information Bureau at the FCC. That's where I came to know her and really to be inspired to get involved in these issues and try to make a difference. So I thank her for her work, and I also want to thank her for her invaluable help in helping put together this session here at Gallaudet today. We couldn't have done it without her. She's the first person I turned to on all these issues, and now I'm going to turn to her again.
Wow. I am both, thank you, Commissioner Copps. I'm both humbled and very honored to get such an introduction from you, who our disability community has admired for these many 8 years. You've been extraordinary to this community, both in terms of what you have said in public and in terms of the actions that you've taken at the FCC, and we just cannot begin to thank you enough. And thank you as well for hosting this event, or putting on this event. It's a wonderful way of getting out this information to the public. I am here on behalf of the Coalition of Organizations for Accessible Technology, which is a coalition that has over 250 affiliates around the nation, national, local, and regional, dedicated to safeguarding the rights of people with disabilities to advancing technologies. While there may be a greater awareness of the needs of people with disabilities in our society generally than there was many years ago, it still remains difficult for the disability community to exert sufficient market pressure to get technology companies who are trying to make their products and services most appealing for the mass public to devote the time and resources necessary to produce accessible products and services for people with disabilities. For this reason, Congress and the FCC has often had to step in to ensure accessible features through laws that have required closed captioning, relay services, hearing incompatibility, and other forms of access. I was actually fortunate to work on many of those laws here at Gallaudet at the National Center for Law and Deafness, which I just want to mention, and in fact, I was here when we helped Marley develop testimony on the closed captioning legislation. But we now find ourselves confronting new technologies, broadband technologies that have outgrown these laws. And so we again turn to lawmakers to ensure that people with disabilities are not left behind as the rest of the nation moves forward in making these technologies a daily part of their lives, in their employment, their education, civic and social participation, and healthcare. To achieve this and to ensure that people with disabilities are not afforded second-class status as our nation migrates to the next generation of electronic communications, new legislative and regulatory requirements continuing these disability protections are needed. Indeed, this need will intensify in the coming years as the nation's growing senior citizen population increases the number of Americans with vision, hearing, cognitive, and mobility disabilities. In order to achieve this, CODE offers the following policy solutions. Oh, and I actually just want to mention that I'm also here on behalf of the Rehabilitation Engineering Research Center on Telecommunications Access, which has an exhibit outside. First, it's most important for accessible design to be incorporated into new broadband technologies early on when the cost and effort associated with doing so remains small, rather than later when expensive retrofitting would be required. Fortunately, many such technologies rely on software, making this much more possible and affordable. For example, universal design can be used to provide access to touch screens and graphical icons for people who are blind or have low vision, reliable and Okay. Do I get extra time?
Yes, you do.
I need as much time as I can get. I don't want to even stop for 5 seconds. Reliable and interoperable voice, real-time text, and video on a phone call without barriers created by network obstructions. Broadband speed sufficient to accommodate the clear transmission of sign language, audio transmission, soundtracks, and interactive communications, as well as emergency services, as Patrick mentioned, in all modes used by people with disabilities. And we need assurances that access features such as closed captioning and video description are not stripped during the transmission. Another very vital way that accessibility can be achieved is by building accessibility directly into the nation's broadband infrastructure through a new concept called a new National Public Inclusive Infrastructure, or NPII, that can ensure basic access by people of all socioeconomic levels. Few of us would consider blocking physical access to libraries or schools. Similarly, we need to give everybody access to the internet. No captions again. Okay? Okay, seems to be going now. Let me keep on going. It's true that assistive technologies can help to bridge the gap and fulfill the need for access in many situations, but with the pace of internet technologies speeding up so rapidly, reliance on assistive technologies becomes difficult. This is because all too often these technologies fall behind the pace of ever-evolving internet technologies. They are also expensive, hard to find, and do not cross various platform solutions. Researchers from the Trace Center at the University of Wisconsin are working with others to build accessibility right into the information infrastructure, which would allow for people to call up interface features or adaptations that they needed anytime, anywhere, and on any device that they would encounter. It would consist of federal support for the development of free and open source access features that would be distributed throughout this infrastructure. And basically the result would be lowering costs of providing access as innovation takes place and making access truly available to everybody. I know I have limited time. I just want to mention a couple of other things. Some people have already talked about the need for universal service funds such as Lifeline and LinkUp to be used for broadband by people with disabilities. This is on CODE's agenda. It is also part of 3101, HR 3101, the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. In addition, more outreach needs to be done to educate people with disabilities about the way that broadband services can help them. Too often people confront barriers, and so they are reluctant to approach broadband technologies. In addition to breaking down those barriers, these individuals need to have education about the accessibility solutions that are available to them. We've also asked the FCC in earlier roundtable discussions to conduct greater research. We need a lot more research on the rate of broadband subscribership among people with disabilities, how to make these services affordable, and barriers that people are confronting. We also need to understand better why people who are older may fail to adopt or abandon broadband technology as they acquire disabilities. Last, and certainly not least, We need to have the federal government serve as a model, and I cannot stress this enough. One of the most important points that we can make is that the federal government, through agencies, the executive and the legislative branches, needs to be in compliance with Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. This is an act that requires federal governments to be accessible. It is a sad but true fact that compliance with Section 508 is not effectively enforced. Routinely, we learn of federal agencies producing websites, videos, and electronic informational materials that are not accessible to people with disabilities, including closed captioning on videos put out by federal agencies. Every single day it is happening. As part of this National Broadband Plan, I implore the FCC to include the need to significantly improve implementation and enforcement of Section 508 with respect to broadband access. One example of the way this can be achieved is having an ongoing assessment of all federal agency actions, make this publicly available, update it regularly, allow other agencies to see what each other are doing. Maybe they'll develop a competition amongst themselves to see who can do best. Let consumers know what the agencies are doing as well. This concludes my remarks, but again, I cannot thank Commissioner Copps. I guess it's kind of fitting that I'm the last speaker, because I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and we all thank you for all that you have done for us these many years, and for putting on this event. It has been a truly extraordinary event, and we look forward to our continued work with you on this area.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to Karen and to all the panel for their discussion of solutions and recommendations. We've talked about community efforts and public safety and at-home job placements and computer training programs, making government more accessible. Those are all good things that need to be included in the plan, and I think your emphasis on accessible government and really a more coordinated interagency approach to the problems of disabilities communities is necessary. I think we're beginning to see that now. It was kind of out of style for the last several years to have a lot of interagency contact among the agencies of the government, but I think that is definitely being redressed right now. I've got a number of questions here. I think we can get through these in fairly good fashion. A number of them seem to be asking about broadband program closed captioning and audio description, and wondering about what's the authority of the FCC to really make good things happen on closed captioning, video programming in the broadband world. Karen, I know you know as much about the legislative, the Commission's authority, the regulatory authority as it exists, and then what might be done legislatively to address some of the things that we need to do. Can you comment on this?
As you know, we have Code has been working actively on Capitol Hill on legislation. Again, it's the Video Accessibility, it's the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, which contains various components of, or various provisions that would bring all of the laws that have existed that were passed in the 80s and 90s up until the 21st century. However, there are many things within that act that actually the FCC can do on its own. For example, we think that the FCC probably has enough authority to use Lifeline and link-up funds for allow people to choose whether they want to use those funds for broadband or the public switch network. The FCC also has authority to initiate a proceeding on real-time text. In the past, deaf and hard of hearing people and people with speech disabilities routinely use TTYs for communication. TTYs are primarily an analog-based form of communication. They're slow, they're antiquated, they've gone out of style. As people have moved to digital communications and video, TTYs are getting put in the backs of closets. What that means, though, is that there is no substitute for real-time text, and real-time is character by character. We're not talking about IM or chat or paging or any kind of other text messaging where you type and then send. However, there is no standard and reliable form of real-time text in the digital world at this time, and that's something that the FCC can definitely start. I also think that perhaps the FCC has enough authority to extend the closed captioning rules. You know, the closed cap, if you look at the Act itself, the Act talks about video programming distributors. It doesn't necessarily limit that to entities that are not providing programming over the internet. So those are just 3 examples, and I think that there's probably more that the Commission can take action on.
Good. Thank you. I think we've answered this one already. Why hasn't the FCC authorized the use of Lifeline link-up telephone service, subsidies for low-income people to choose broadband service instead of regular traditional phone services? I've been asking the same question for a while, and hopefully in the broadband plan we can get to an answer. This maybe we can direct towards Nina. The Commission has developed alerting standards for broadcasters and cable operators through the emergency alert system, and for a cell phone provider through the commercial mobile alert system, which is a work in progress. Are there any thoughts for broadband providers to have similar standards for emergency alerts?
I'm not sure I can answer that question, to be honest with you, about broadband providers having standards for emergency alerts. I will just say that, just as a general observation, we're doing a lot better at setting up emergency alerting systems at the state and local level that are not just tied to a traditional telephone, landline telephone, which used to be the primary form of alerting the public, what some people call reverse 911 in a generic sense. We're now getting to the point with the CMAS system at the FCC and with the EAS system, modernizing the EAS system, and at a local level too, where we're not just tying the ability to alert the public to a landline telephone, but also to a mobile devices. So I think in general we're doing better at the emergency alerting aspect of emergency services. We can always do better, but there's definitely more of a concerted effort to include devices that are not just a landline voice telephone in text form. I'm not sure I can answer the question about the broadband provider, though.
All right, I think this one's going to come in your direction, too. It's kind of entitled Vulnerability of Broadband, and cites the fact that Wednesday night a local cable company went out in large parts of Fairfax County. No VoIP, no internet, no TV. Attempts to contact the company eventually weren't successful because the line was busy. There was nothing on the radio, and we ended up with an information blackout, which could have been deadly if it was a time of emergency. So how do we address that vulnerability? Some of it seems to be almost inherent in the technology itself, when power goes out or whatever. But how do we begin to get a grip on the vulnerability of broadband as well as understanding its great potential?
Well, I think just like any other technology, we need to make sure that our systems are redundant and as reliable as possible, and that there's sufficient backup power for all of our systems. As consumers, we need to think about, if I only have one primary form of communication, is that enough if it goes out? Different devices are different in terms of their ability to communicate with when the power goes out or not. So I think it's just, from a consumer perspective, it's understanding what services you rely on, and do you only have a single service that you rely on? If you do, what are its characteristics? So on the consumer side, be educated about when they will and will not work. And then on the broadband provider side, I mean, it's just like any other provider. They never want their service to be out. And so, it's just a matter of ensuring that our broadband systems are redundant, have sufficient backup power, that they're reliable, et cetera. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And actually, I think the internet has made this a very small world right now. And if you look at the virtual world itself, I think, an incident where it affects a particular county, especially in the business world today, doesn't have the ramifications it may have had before. I mean, because now, and especially in our world, our employees are distributed throughout this country. And if for a particular customer, if we are having a problem in Fairfax County, that doesn't mean that we can't switch over and bring more people online somewhere in California. And that's really our goal, is to provide our clients with that level of flexibility. So I think that is critical. I think, as Patrick said, we're always going to have issues. It's how you build the processes around those to support those issues and keep yourself up. And again, the internet itself is inherently redundant. And so from that perspective, I think we've gone a long way, and I think we've answered some of these questions.
Right. Patrick.
Well, I hope that you're the new CSRIC, the Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, will address some of these issues in general and from a public safety perspective. But listening to Alan's presentation, a lot of what he was saying is applicable to emergency services. And in a broadband world, and this is not unique to any particular, whether you're an individual with a disability or not, but in a broadband world, we're going to have such a more redundant 911 and emergency services system. In this telephone-based system that we have today, when the 911 center goes out or the central office goes out, we're out. You know, we may have a backup center in a nearby county, but it's not a virtual world. In the systems that we're designing, we can set it up software-based, going to the point that Karen made. We can set up the system so that if the 911 center goes out in Topeka, it's possible that we could have those calls answered entirely across the state or in another state. It's just a matter of learning how to do that. Technology, we can do it. So we can have what we call virtual 911 centers, if you will. The call is local, but it can be answered somewhere else because it's the nature of internet systems or IP-based systems. The other thing is, to this community, what I think is kind of interesting, not every 911 center is going to have trained interpreters that can speak American Sign Language, but some will. And so you may have a local emergency that wants to communicate to 911 using sign language via video, and the local 911 center may not have that capability. But in a broadband world, we can tie in the local 911 center and a remote interpreting facility that can do the interpretation and do it in real time with the local 911 center. There's no way we could do that today. But with broadband, we can. And so there's a lot of advantages. And there's limitations, just like any system, but broadband and it makes it a lot more efficient and effective.
Great, thank you. Here's one that kind of reminds us that broadband and the internet are a global phenomenon, not just national. As a Canadian, I'm wondering how this will affect deaf people internationally. Is there a form of networking that will require other countries to do the same? Goes on to say he thinks the United States is doing a good job, fantastic job with accessibility, and that internet captioning is a great new step. But he's wondering just about, I guess, how we all march to the same tune in an interconnected world.
Well, actually, this is a perfect question for me because I just got back from Geneva speaking to the International Telecommunications Union, which is part of the United Nations, which is implementing the new UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities that our president just agreed to sign and hopefully it will be ratified by our Congress. And that ITU and other aspects of the UN will be looking at these very issues. How people with disabilities, this is one of the things listed in the UN Convention, how people can have access to information and communication technologies. So I'm not the only one, there are various other people both from the United States and from around the world that are looking at these very issues now on a global level.
Great, anybody else?
I'll just say that because we're moving to an internet-based 911 system, it has to be international. And so we're working with standards bodies, for example, that we didn't previously, like the Internet Engineering and Task Force, which is an international organization. So our work on the 911 is definitely working with international organizations. And we're also working closely with our European counterparts. There's another group called the European Emergency Number Association. They were successful recently in getting the EU to adopt, I'm not sure exactly what the procedural vehicle was, but it's essentially a policy objective to have next generation 112 in Europe, which is the equivalent of 911. So we are reaching out to our international counterparts as well.
It's interesting, Karen said she was just back from the UN, and Marley Madeline's telling me she's just getting ready to go off to a UN conference next week. So we're getting to be, you're handing off to her.
I gave her many good restaurants to
That's
go.
good. That's excellent. You know, we really have not done a good job in this country of trying to learn what other countries are doing and the good choices they made and the bad choices they made. And thank goodness this legislation that came from Congress and the President requiring us to develop a National Broadband Plan mandated us to do something I've been asking for us to do for 8 years, was to go out to other countries and learn. So as we develop this broadband plan, we are instructed to go to at least 75 global markets, international markets in at least 25 countries and learn from what they're doing. it's not that we have to adapt what other societies or cultures are doing, but it's just to share common experiences and see if we can't pick up some do's and don'ts. Another question goes to the adequacy of the data we have on disabilities communities. Does the FCC really have all of the census information or availability of services information or the kind of data that we really need to make intelligent decisions for a broadband plan? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, I do know that there's been a number of studies around the Disability Statistics Center knowing about broadband use by people with disabilities. It's about, well, actually internet use is about half of that for the general population, and then broadband is even less than that. So there are some statistics, there are some questions in regards to the census dealing more with people with disabilities. So I think there's some of the data is there and it's being gathered, and then some more on the mapping with a rural utility service that'll give us more data, but there's some out there. It may be a little bit sparse in some areas.
I think that there's definitely room, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, for additional research on how people are adopting broadband, whether they're adopting it, what the barriers are. The FCC used to create reports on the adoption of broadband, and I believe it was the second or third report had looked at people with disabilities, but I don't think that they've really looked at this population in depth since that time.
Okay, and here's kind of a final question, which how can we get involved with these FCC workshops being hosted weekly? That's an excellent question, and I'm delighted to see the interest in that. I guess the best place to start there is go to www.broadband.gov, G-O-V, and you'll find there a schedule for these various workshops. There have been, I don't know, 30 or 40 of them, I think, already probably. You can find the schedule for the webcast. There's a blog. There's all kinds of additional information, and your participation in that is really encouraged. So I think we heard a lot of good news today about efforts that are being made. I think we have good news from government that government at last is going to address these questions. I would end, though, not just on a note of optimism, because I am an optimism, but also on a note of caution, that it's wonderful we're developing a broadband plan, but getting that broadband plan approved where it needs to be approved, lots of different players will be involved in it, and getting it implemented is going to take a national commitment like we haven't seen in this country, and there are lots of other folks out there competing for resources to get their issues accomplished. This is an extremely important one, but we all have to realize that there are going to be challenges ahead and struggles ahead if we're going to realize ubiquitous. This is a big deal. I mean, building this kind of infrastructure. You know, we've had infrastructure challenges before throughout the course of history of this country. That's how we built America, by building its infrastructure, whether it was roads and turnpikes and canals in the early days, or regional and transcontinental railroads later on, or interstate highways, or rural electrification, or what they call POTS, plain old telephone service. Those were all great infrastructure challenges that we more or less met, stepped up to the plate. The government sector and the private sector learned how to work together. We had cooperation, and we got the job done. Now, in addition to the POTS, we need the PANS, which is the pretty awesome new stuff, and that's what I'm interested in getting out there. But it's not going to come cheaply, and it's not going to come without some battles. So we're going to need your help long term. This is a long-term commitment, and I know that no folks know equally as well as you what it means to be long-term committed. So we're counting on that kind of commitment as we move ahead. I really learned a lot today. I plan to go out and look some more at the exhibitors if they're still out there. I want to thank, there's so many people to thank, and I don't have time to thank everybody, but I want to particularly thank a few people. Roger Goldblatt, who worked so assiduously to put this hearing together. He put together a lot of hearings for us when we were doing the DTV transition, and as you can tell, he knows what he's doing, how to bring off a good hearing. And I already have thanked Karen for the work that she did. Jennifer Schneider in my office did an amazing job. Elizabeth Lyle, Susan Kimmel, Tom Chandler, Cheryl King. I don't want to start naming names or somebody will be mad at me because I didn't get everybody's name. Our audiovisual staff over here always does a superb job. Most of all, I'm grateful to you folks for taking your time to come out here, share your experiences with us. Don't look at this as the one brief little conversation. This is an ongoing dialogue. We've got so much work to do between now and February, so we're counting on your involvement and your advice and counsel. And join me now, if you will, in giving a round of applause to what I think was an excellent panel here. And with that, I think we are adjourned. Thank you all.